because see, we are used to a very type of writing. So when someone asks you to write for a book or for something, it becomes very difficult for me. Because normally I prefer code or write references. We are essential for any writing.
Actually,
sir, we are used to that. We are used to that. In fact, services have trained us in such a way that we write in that fashion only, and it's not a creative kind of writing, but it's a service writing. I would put it like that.
Raju sir, I think the Vice Chancellor joined.
Yes, he has joined.
Oh.
Yeah, he has joined. Yeah, I can see. But
yes. Good morning, sir. Professor Gurmeet Singh, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
No, he's muted. He's muted.
Actually, you join, then you can't unmute yourself sometimes. That's the problem, which I said in the beginning. So the administrator probably has the controls.
Sir, can the Vice Chancellor hear us?
His video is off, so you could request him to switch on video. And
Raju sir, can the Vice Chancellor hear us?
I don't. I'm not able to see. Also, I think maybe just let me check.
He's online. He's online.
Online. Okay. But I'm not able to see on the screen.
Maybe he's not able to unmute himself.
Yes. Far has come. Good morning, sir.
he's come now.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Ambassador Trivand and Srinivasa.
Yes,
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Sir, with the permission of the Vice Chancellor, may I commence?
Yeah, please start.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Pondicherry University, Professor Gurmeet Singh, Your Excellency, Ambassador Anil Trignayath, Admiral Muralidharan, Professor Subramaniam Raju, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the UGC Center for Maritime Studies, Pondicherry University, and Electronic Journal of Social and Strategic Studies, it is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this National Maritime Day webinar. I am especially thankful, and I personally and on behalf of the UGC Center welcome the Ambassador and the Admiral for taking their time from their busy schedule to join us today. Ladies and gentlemen, you are aware that we are going to discuss sustainable maritime architecture for India, Indian perspectives, global concerns. In fact, when we were deciding on this particular title, Professor Raju asked me one question. He said, we are saying Indian perspectives, but we are talking about global concerns. So when we had a little talk on that, we came to realize that our focus is not just India, but India's concerns in the Indo-Pacific, because we know what the existing geopolitical scenario is, and therefore discussing India on a standalone mode would not suffice. We will have to address the global concerns which are part and parcel of India's concerns. So that is why we specifically chose the term Indian perspective, global concerns. We are all aware that India is emerging as a maritime power. We have come a long way and we intend to go a very long way. We are also aware of the geopolitical concerns prevailing in the environment that is surrounding India, rather I will say enveloping this whole world. Now, to look at the concerns of India only as traditional security threats in the maritime dimension or non-traditional security threats in the maritime dimension would not suffice. take into consideration the environmental and other issues that we are facing on the ocean space. Keeping all these factors in mind, we are delighted to have such distinguished eminences amongst us to share their perspectives and enhance our wisdom. I'm sure the scholars who are attending this webinar will take home a lot of points for further research and therefore strengthen India's commitments to understanding and expanding our maritime capability. So saying, I once again welcome all of you, and now it is my pleasure to introduce and welcome Professor Raju for the inaugural note. Professor Subramaniam Raju is an eminent scholar on South Asian regional cooperation and maritime studies, with nearly 24 or more scholarly books, both edited and contributed, scores of papers and conference talks published and delivered in India and abroad. His expertise on both these domains, understanding South Asia as well as the maritime domain, needs very little emphasis. It is my pleasure to invite Professor Raju to give the inaugural address. Raju sir.
Yes, sir. Good morning to everyone. On behalf of Center for Maritime Studies, Pondicherry University, and the Electronic Journal of Social and Statistical Studies, I invite you all for a webinar on sustainable maritime architecture for India on the day when we are celebrating the 52nd National Maritime Day. And I cordially welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gurmeet Singh. Despite your busy schedule, you have been kind enough to be with us today in the morning to give your presidential address. And I must place on record that the kind of encouragement, the kind of support which has been extended by Honorable Vice Chancellor to the center, where we were able to carry out many academic events despite the constraints we have, either financial constraint or the pandemic situation. But then somehow we were able to do continuously the activities at the Center for Maritime Studies. Sir, we are very, very grateful to you for your kind encouragement and support being given to us for the past 4 years. And we cordially welcome you, sir, to give your presidential address. Now, I also welcome respected Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, who is a former diplomat, and also at the moment is currently distinguished fellow at Vivekananda International Foundation, New Delhi, who has kind enough to give consent to be with us today to give a special address. Sir, we welcome you to this webinar, and looking forward to listen to you about your experience regarding the sustainable maritime architecture for India, which is very, very important at the moment we are talking about how India could really rise to a major power, and where the maritime domain is essentially to be taken into consideration when we are looking for development. And now let me move on to express our gratitude to respected Admiral MP Muralidharan, AVSM and BAR NM, and former Director General of Indian Coast Guard, who has been also with us today, and who has given kind consent and being with us today to discuss and give keynote address on the 52nd Maritime National Maritime Day. So we cordially welcome you, sir, to this one-day webinar. And also we look at the panelists and the faculty, scholars, students. We cordially invite all of you to be actually participate in this webinar. We have been discussing how maritime domain has become important for any country's economic development or prosperity, either for littoral state or landlocked state. So in other words, one can say that moving from globalization, we are talking about, we are witnessing the process of maritimization of the world, whether either landlocked or the coastal state. We are now in the process of looking at the maritimization of the world. In other words, we talk about this wealth is now we are expecting from the sea or ocean. And also our Prime Minister is also talking about $5 trillion economy by 2025. If that is the case, then probably we need to look at the maritime domain, where we can also look for adding a factor to reach the destiny for attaining the $5 trillion by 2025 or 2030 or in the near future. You know, on the other hand, we are talking about, when we are talking about ocean wealth, we need to look at the ocean health. There is a strong link between ocean wealth and ocean health. So probably when you are talking about sustainability or sustainable maritime architecture for India, invariably we have to bring this notion of ocean health. So that is something where we are talking about. On the other hand, we are talking about sea lanes of communication to be protected. We are talking about rules-based order, as Dr. Srinivasan was talking about the Indo-Pacific rules-based order and India's role in Quad, etc., etc. Also, we are looking at about how these the maritime threats, right from rise of sea level, right from climate change or piracy, maritime terrorism, or illegal trade, or illegal fishing, etc., etc. We need to look at about the ocean health and ocean governance. In other words, one can look at how we can now focus on ocean health, which is very, very important for any country, particularly India, to look for well. So in that sense, when you look at, we also have Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, or SAGAR, security and growth for all in the region. I think India needs to play a very significant role when we are talking about ocean health or ocean health. And India cannot become an economic power unless it becomes a maritime power. Unless we develop a strong blue economy, I don't think India can become a maritime power. I think this is something where we need to look at about this. So I don't want to take much time. So I again, cordially invite everyone to be part of this webinar. And with your permission, maybe, I don't know whether it can be permissible. I have a freedom in academics. So I feel something I would like to tell that whenever we are talking about India's maritime policy, I think it strikes me to remind, as a student of maritime studies student, let me allow me to say this word: to err is human, to err continuously is a policy making. I think there I stop here. Thank you very much, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, Raju sir, for setting the tone for discussions and deliberations during the webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now to introduce and invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor for his presidential address. Mr. Gurmeet Singh is a renowned academic administrator and an internationally reputed expert in the field of corrosion science and smart materials. Apart from a distinguished career in academics, Professor Singh has also served as special observer for the West Bengal State Assembly elections appointed by the Election Commission of India. Professor Singh has served as chair professor at Lunga University, Taipei, and he started the collaborative research with that university. He was also a visiting scientist to Hungary and Japan, and has been on academic assignments to a number of countries: Germany, Italy, Australia, Singapore, Korea, Thailand, and Kenya. He is also currently a visiting professor at Japanese Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, Ishikawa, Japan. Apart from guiding scores of MPhil and PhD scholars, Professor Singh has supervised many R&D projects running into billions of rupees, and with about 150 plus research papers in high impact international journals. He is also among the most cited scientists in his field. He is a recipient of many distinguished honors, including the Meritorious Contribution Award, the Annapurna Award, membership of the Royal Society of Chemistry, London, and fellowship of the Environmental Society of India. It's my privilege to invite Professor Gurmeet Singh to deliver the presidential address. So,
Thank you very much, Dr. Srinivasan. The Center for Maritime Studies and Electronic Journal of Social and Strategic Studies have always been taking lead in some of the very important topics where we all need to put our thoughts together to make the world a better place, better livable place. And I give my highest compliments to them for organizing and taking another step forward in that direction. Very respected Dr. Srinivasan, chief of this journal, our Ambassador Anil Trignayak, who has been to our university earlier also, and I had the occasion of meeting and discussing some issues. I vividly remember that, and his talk was a very well received one. We look forward to your talk again in this seminar, and our very dear Vice Admiral MP Muralidharan, who also has been joining us on many an occasion earlier and has been enriching us with his thoughts, and all others who have joined. Subramaniam Raju has always been a lead player in this. All young research scholars who have joined in, and I'm sure they are going to be the richest beneficiary out of this seminar. Well, I have always been maintaining that water is a very important resource for every nation. And I think many an occasion earlier I have said it, that if ever there is going to be a war, third world war, if you leave aside the one which is now threatening us, Ukraine, Russia, it's going to be over water. And I do not know, we have a very large coastline in our country. And if you look at the history, till about 1955, we were not paying the required kind of an attention which is required to be paid to our coastline. It was a sort of a neglected entity, and our naval force also, we were thinking that, well, it is not required and we may not have a war of the real kind. So for a long enough time, a Britisher was heading our navy, and then ultimately, of course, we came on our own. And of late, the way we have developed our navy, I think it's something we really appreciated, and we are now counted as one of the very modern, independent thinking naval forces of the world. I'm saying this because you look at those countries who do not have water around. Look at their plight, how miserable they feel. Take the case of Uganda. I was in Kenya for a long enough time, and the whole trade used to pass through Kenya. The place I was staying, the road was right in front of that. Heavy trucks would pass through that day in and day out. And the moment this supply would stop, they would have a nightmarish experience. Look at the country like Afghanistan. So wherever there is no water around, look at the sad plight of these countries. They are dependent on others very heavily. And there was a time when countries were not paying enough attention to see. They thought that it is just a collection of water and we don't have to really bother about it. After mid-50s, India also realized the importance of this, and we started thinking about how best we can modernize, how best we can utilize our resources. And it is somewhere around that time we realized the importance of this great asset, water, which we had in plenty and a long coastline. People only think of this as a maritime trade body. That's about it. It is not that. From environmental point of view, we need to be concerned about it. And if we preserve our coastline, if we preserve our flora and fauna around, I think it gives a great security to our land. Then from the economic point of view, the trade routes, trade maximum passes through the sea routes, and we have in plenty, and that goes to our good luck, I'll say, good fortune that God has given us that way. And the other important is security issues. That itself would be a great concern for every nation. And India has been doing very well. One concern that we always had was that we had Andaman and Nicobar Island, and there was at one point of time, there was a thought that, well, it is not important. Why bother about this? This is 2 hours flight from our mainland. So why develop this? We can just afford to forget and pay greater attention to the coastline, which is there in our mainland. That was not so. Now, if you look at it, the strategic importance of this Andaman Nicobar Island and a group of Lakshadweep islands that we have, how much economic exclusive zone gets extended, how much natural wealth we get it. If we explore, I think this is an area which is rich in minerals and other sea resources. So we are fortunate that our country has all kinds of climates. We have rich resources in terms of water, but we need to take care and we need to harness the best that we can do out of this. That is why after 60s, a lot of dedicated labs came up for this purpose. A lot of research CSI have started taking in their own lab, and universities also across our country, and along with other collaborative universities, they started working on the rich potential that we can get from this water resource. I have repeatedly said it, that there was a time when one of our ambassadors, in fact, it goes to his credit, Ambassador Madanjit, in mid-50s, he said SAARC is going to be a very important group of countries, and the whole world a time will come when they'll pay attention to our country and our subcontinent. That's turning out to be a fact. That's turning out to be a reality now. We are tending to forget about Middle East. Oil is not important. We are tending to forget about the important trade routes like Panama and Suez Canal. The whole world is now concentrating on Indian Ocean as a trade route. In fact, it has become the busiest trade route now. And we have a good control over it, and we are really paying due attention to this. And our Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which we were neglecting till about mid-50s, now we have started paying attention to this, and we have started calling this as Almighty's blessings on our country, that we have a permanent aircraft carrier station forever on the sides of our country, guarding our mainland in the best of ways. So when we look at it from environmental point of view, from environmental sustainability, from our natural resources, from economic point of view, from security point of view, this assumes a great amount of importance for our nation as well as for the other nations from the security point of view. If we are strong, if we are doing this, I think we are in for a very stable period. I'm sure you would have read about the inter-countries river disputes, India, Bangladesh, India, Nepal. Have you paid a little more attention in the formative years when Bangladesh was formed and when Fraka, Braj and all come up? And had we paid enough attention to our Nepal-Indo rivers, I think we wouldn't have faced all those problems which we are now facing. Of course, these are minor aberrations here and there, which we are capable of sorting it out. But look at the way Danube River passes through many countries in Europe continent. They never had any problem in terms of sharing resources or traveling or tourism point of view, or from environmental point of view. Go to any country where Danube passes through. How clean are the coastline? How clean are water? So this is, and then to control this, in good old days, they had set up a Danube Commission, if I'm right. Then in other countries, Mekong Commission is there. So we should have thought something like that in order to have a better control over our resources. But well, as we say, there is never anything late in our life. We can always begin with right earnest. And it is through these discussions and webinars which we have now organized, our Electronic Center for Strategic Studies and our own Maritime Center. If they have joined hand and number of good webinars they've organized earlier, this is what we need to do. If we think on these lines and work jointly, I think we can give a good direction, not only for our young scholars, but also to MEA, that what direction to probably follow in the days and years to come. So far, our diplomatic corps has been doing very well, but then if they are supported by our academic ventures with a right amount of data and the right amount of academic thinking, I think they will be able to do far better in their own arena. And I'm sure we are in for a right kind of a thinking. I give my richest compliments to Dr. Srinivasan and Professor Subramanian Raju that they have thought of this. And Dr. Srinivasan has rightly pointed out when they thought about India's role in the global context and what kind of discussion went on, and this is the result of this is ultimately resulted in this kind of a webinar. I suppose this is very important, and it is particularly important from the young minds, the researchers who are attending this. Once they listen to these greats in their own area, let me tell you, to reach where these friends who are participating today, it's not easy. You will find, if you collected data, you will find that anybody who joins academics in a university will, with due course of rattle, would land up towards the fag end as a professor, or anybody joining civil services would absolutely, in due course, land up as a joint secretary and additional secretary, or anybody joining as an IPS would ultimately become an ADGP or whatever. But to reach a status of an ambassador, full-fledged ambassador, and having served in many countries, then to become a vice admiral or equivalent in defense forces, it is not child's play. I think 1 out of 100 would reach this, and this would give my young scholars an insight into that what kind of a rich experience these speakers have, and they are going to be the biggest beneficiaries. So I urge all my young scholars that after listening to their talks, be in touch with them, and when you interact with these greats, you will get a lot more direction for your research area, and I think you will be able to do much better than what otherwise you would have done. So, and I'm sure I can say this with absolute guarantee that you would feel far more enriched after attending this seminar than what you are feeling otherwise. So I'm really grateful to all of them that they have taken their time out and they have decided to be with us for the benefit of our young minds. Young minds, I'm saying, because they have a real spark. They are on the takeoff stage. And if some guidance is given to them, I think they'll be, sky will be the limit for them. So I'm grateful to all of them for taking the time out. And I'm particularly appreciative of the effort of Dr. Srinivasan and Professor Raju that they have come out with this kind of a webinar. That's not the end of the story, let me tell you. This is one of those good webinars we have organized. This effort should continue for the benefit of our nation as well as for the other countries as well. Thank you so very much, and I'm grateful to you for inviting me over here for giving this opening remarks. Thank you very much, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, please carry on. Dr. Srinivasan, we are not able to hear you. You can please carry on.
Sir, my apologies. I think for a fraction of a second, my network went. I'm very sorry, and I'm very grateful to Professor Gurmeet Singh for sharing such valuable thoughts with us. And I particularly, being a student of Pondicherry University, I particularly note that point that the academic world and the practitioner world and the diplomatic world have to come together, learn from the practitioners and the diplomatic world, further the research, and contribute to making national policy. That's a wonderful point that we must carry, and I'm sure all the young scholars have noted the same. I have personally definitely noted it, sir. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce and invite Ambassador Anil Trigunayath for his special address. Ambassador began his journey as a career diplomat in the Indian missions in Ivory Coast, Bangladesh, Mongolia, USA, Russia, Sweden, and Nigeria. He was also India's ambassador to Libya, Jordan, and he was High Commissioner to Malta. Apart from his diplomatic credentials, which I just briefly mentioned, he is a distinguished fellow, founder, and associated with so many think tanks and policy making bodies that I will take the indulgence, or rather take the permission of the ambassador to just mention only 4 or 5 of them, because they are
Don't
so
mention.
Please allow
Let's
me.
leave it.
Please allow me, sir. And ambassador is the president of Millennial India International Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Agriculture. He is also a member of the International Advisory Council of the Confederation of Indian Industries. He is a distinguished fellow and head of West Asia Experts Group at the Vivekananda International Foundation. He is a member of the Governing Council of Raisina House and Usasana's Foundation, also the India-Japan Foundation. He is a visiting fellow and advisor at the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs and Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. He is also an advisor to the BRICS Chamber of Commerce and Asia-Africa Chamber of Commerce, as well as an honorary member of International Trade Council, Brussels. Apart from this, he is associated with the Institute.
Can't hear you. We can.
And this is connectivity issue. In
Yeah.
a minute, so automatically it will get sorted out.
He is a prolific writer and commentator on foreign and economic policy, education, and interfaith dialogue related issues. West Asia, Africa, and Russia, managing India's interests in conflict zones. These are his special areas of interest. He is a postgraduate in physics, studied Russian history, culture, and language at JNU, and he is a visiting fellow. As a visiting fellow, researched on WTO and regional trading.
Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan. I think we can start. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can, sir.
Yes, very well, very well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan, for that introduction and for the invitation to join such an illustrious panel of experts. At the outset, let me convey my felicitations to all the mariners in the world, and especially our Indians, on their National Maritime Day that we are celebrating today. Very opportune moment. And of course, it was such an erudite speech or presidential address by Honorable Professor Gurmeet Singh, Vice Chancellor of Pondicherry University. I very fondly recall my visit and association, sir, at your very beautiful and profound university. Admiral Muralidharan, Professor Raju, and many other distinguished academics who are present here, dear students and research scholars. It's my great privilege to be here with you, and I was so happy when Dr. Srinivasan, who is a dear friend, had called me to share my thoughts on this. I'm not an expert on maritime affairs, but as a diplomat, you have to deal with these all kinds of issues. In 2008, when I was posted in Delhi, we were trying to launch our own doctrine, maritime doctrine. And I received a note for my comments, and Foreign Secretary marked it to me asking, what do you say? And they asked all the countries, because I was dealing with the Middle East at the time, so Gulf and being Africa and all. So I wrote in that, I said, we need to have it. But at the same time, to be a blue water navy, to be able to exercise the influence, because you have no choice but to exercise your sovereignty, your influence in the Indian Ocean region. We need to have a political will and resolve. Without that, these doctrines, frankly, have little meaning. And that was my comment, which of course eventually went. But I still hold it. Things have changed a great deal since then. It is not only a geo-economic, geopolitical contestation, which has come onto the fore after the Chinese aggressive behavior and the maritime disputes that is continuing with many countries in the region. More importantly, our region is now becoming a hotbed of big power rivalry between an emergent and somewhat arrogant China and somewhat declining Western powers. And so we are going to see a very difficult time ahead. And it is important that a country of India's size cannot sit on the sidelines. We had to do much more than we do. Often in the Vivekananda Foundation, we have discussions where we have many senior naval officers about the inadequacy of resource allocation. Fortunately, that is being addressed now. We all know that more than 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and nearly 40% of the world population lives within 60 miles of the coastlines. Littoral estates are affected as well. And the estimated value of the ocean economy is also very significant. More than $3 to $6 trillion that we are talking per year. So that's going to be, again, a geo-economic contestation for that region as well. 50% of all international tourists travel to coastal areas. As you know, that all the countries under the international law have, those who can, have an exclusive economic zones, which extends up to about 200 nautical miles from their coastline. Even there have been a lot of disputes pertaining to various islands where they really like. So we know that the nations of the world are actually connected by militarily and economically by the seas. Still, many of them don't have the capacity to establish their maritime sovereignty and security. That is also something we see. As far as India is concerned, we know that India is a maritime nation. We used to have a great shipping industry that was decimated by the colonial powers for their own ends. India's several empires moved across to Central and South Asia. But more importantly, we are essentially a trading nation. And you all know that the consular missions, diplomatic mission, which we call them now, were actually set up to help the shipping and trade. So that shows that we are very much present and we have been there for ages now. We are also one of the biggest fishing nations in the world and exporters of marine products. So what happens? We also witness a lot of fishing disputes with our neighbors. Only last, I think about 3-4 days back, I was in Colombo for a conference on BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal initiative. I want to tell you that the Bay of Bengal is the biggest bay in the world, through which more than 70% of Chinese energy passes through. Nearly 90% of the energy passes to Korea and Japan. And India today has taken over the security dimension, one of the key pillars of the Bay of Bengal initiative. More importantly, we are also a resident power in the Indian Ocean. So therefore, it is imperative for us to exert and protect our interests and sovereignty at the region, which is going to be a problematic issue as China flexes its muscles through its maritime conversion of its BRI policy, which it is expanding at a great pace. It is following its string of pearls strategy with our neighbors. And that is what a challenge as far as the geostrategic dimension goes. But more importantly, we have to also talk about sustainability and the blue economy. Those are also extremely important dimensions. As I mentioned earlier, with an asset value of over $24 trillion, I think that there is a necessity for these to be harnessed in a sustainable manner. We have already created a lot of mess as far as climate change is concerned. We are not there yet to be able to retrieve ourselves, especially for our future generations. So it is important that there is some kind of balance, some kind of approaches, some kind of sustainability is brought about into this maritime domain. And as you know that all these business models, the interactive models between various states, littorals, have to be worked out so that it is a mutually beneficial and participative exercise and not dictated by a power or the power. So we have to be very careful and cautious about these things. We know that transport, tourism, hydrocarbons, deep sea mining, renewable energy, ocean biotechnology, and many more would need that new areas of discourse, new areas of exploitation of these resources have to be sustainably integrated. It is very important. Therefore, when India came out with this new idea, which Prime Minister Modi spelled out as SAGAR or Sagarmala project, security and growth for all in the region. So that encompasses everything. So therefore, it is important that we work out some kind of a well-integrated PPP model, possibly, and sustainable instruments for meeting the goals of growth, employment generation, equity, protection of environment. Now we are seeing that since at least 2015, world is trying to work on these sustainable development goals. And even among those goals, goal number 14 refers to sustainable development of ocean resources, and it is titled as Life Below Water. Conserve and sustainably use oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. And this is also linked to several other dimensions, like another goal is goal number 1, which deals with poverty, the goal number 2 that deals with food security, etc. So they are virtually integrated into this. Therefore, it is imperative that we do that. Now, India has been also very active in this domain. India, as I said, needs to take the leadership position because of Indian Ocean. So in March, we had this Denmark, with the collaboration with Denmark, a summit which was called like Maritime Summit. And in this conference, they decided how we are going to work for the next 10 years. In which, again, Prime Minister Modi issued a booklet, which was like a vision, ebook sort of, which was Maritime Vision for 2030. I would recommend all our research scholars, students to go through it. It's an important document. Thereafter, we also had a UN Security Council meeting in which will provide you some useful inputs. India, when it was supporting for creation of a legally binding international treaty under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, UNCLOS, which you all know. By the way, the biggest power, America, has not even signed it. So we have international institutions, International Court of Justice. It gives its ruling in favor of Philippines against China. And China refuses to demand. How do you do that? What do you do after that? How do you proceed further? These are the issues that are going to create a much bigger problem for the maritime international order for the free and open Indo-Pacific, as we are calling now, or the freedom of navigation. All these things are going to play out in a much starker way than we are looking at it. I would say that there is a consciousness in the world about these things. So when this One Ocean Summit, which India hosted with the French and some other Western countries and the United Nations, this particular issue was spelled out. So there was a high ambition coalition was created, which was called Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, BBNJ. And their effort was that by the end of the year in this One Ocean Summit, that we should try to develop these things. All the Western countries have supported this. Then we took another nationwide awareness campaign to clean plastics. I mean, there's a dumping of plastics. And if you read them, several reports are there, that there is an alternate, which is a real world, which is under the sea and the oceans. How are you going to protect that? Because if that is not protected, that is still somehow less polluted than the world we are living in today. So there is another world under the ocean, and we need to protect that. It is extremely important. So India has come up with something, Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. Again, that commitment is there to preserve the marine resources. So I think that this is something, it is extremely important, and the whole world will have to continue to work together on that. Lastly, I would like to say there is much more one can talk about, but because of paucity of time, I would again refer to something which India was chairing. As you know, we are currently part of the UN Security Council, where every month a country takes on the presidency of the council. And when we had the presidency of the council, at that time, not only the unforeseen problem of Afghanistan came up, and India had to feel for it and come up with a resolution. Several other things happened. One of the most important things under the chairmanship was that there was this conference on maritime domain, and in which security and international cooperation were discussed. Prime Minister Modi, first Prime Minister ever to address this kind of a conference, in which we have seen President Putin was another one who was present at this, among other 3-4 other leaders, which was for the first time that happened. So in this high-level discussion, 5 principles were advanced by Prime Minister Modi. And I'm telling you because this is something very recent. And this deals with also maritime trade and peaceful settlement of conflicts and disputes. Because without peaceful settlement, you are just looking at wars. Wars means more pollution, war means more problems for the world. So these 5 principles essentially were that we should remove all barriers to legitimate maritime trade. You know, the illegal fishing and all those things, you understand. The fishermen are caught by Sri Lankan Navy or the Bangladesh Navy or some others. Several times it happens, and we keep on doing. And then you have to settle all the maritime disputes on the basis of international law. There's nothing like that. You have to follow the law. If you don't follow the law, then where do you go? I mean, the war is the only other option, which nobody wants at the moment. We are already facing, as Professor Singh mentioned, a major catastrophe which is happening in Europe at the moment. And also, the third principle was that the global community should fight together against the threats posed by natural disasters and terrorists. You know, the piracy, you must have heard about it. India has been engaged in anti-piracy campaign for a very long time. In fact, we have stationed 2 of our aircraft ships, battleships, to escort various ships and to keep the sea lines of communications intact. And then the marine environment and resources needs to be protected. And lastly, the maritime connectivity should be further encouraged. So I think that this is important. And what Putin also said, was that we should create a special framework within the UN to deal with maritime crimes. That's very important. Then only you can ensure security in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific, in the Persian Gulf region, Gulf of Guinea, or the Atlantic Ocean, or wherever. So piracy and hostage taking is rampant there. Then there is a problem with small states, which are being threatened by climate change of being submerged into the water. They have come up with something recently, and India has been working on those with these countries in a very productive manner. So we have challenges, but we need to help create sustainable advantages. Many of the countries don't have the capabilities to monitor the threats in their naval waters or in their EEZs. There's plenty, majority of the countries. So you have to do the capacity building for them. There have to be evolution of the rules, regulations, which can provide transnational criminal organizations. How are we going to confront them? So the challenges are plenty, I think, but it is important that to be sustainable, the human activities have to be balanced with the ocean's capacity to stay healthy. As Mahatma Gandhi used to say, there is enough for the world's need, but there is not enough for the world's greed. So I'll stop here. Thank you once again for inviting me.
Thank you very much, sir. In fact, I won't take the liberty of summarizing your address, but I will definitely like to mention few points in the reverse order. The point on which you very rightly concluded, in my opinion, is
You're muted, Dr. Srinivasan. You're muted. We can't hear you.
the sustainable. Can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. The sustainable and responsible use of the environment, including the ocean environment, is not merely a matter of addressing livelihood concerns or climate change concerns. It also specifically points to the growth of economic strength of a country. Now, if that economic strength has to grow, then only the other issues, geopolitical issues, security concerns, non-traditional security threats, everything can be addressed when this particular aspect or this dimension is strong. And towards that, the role that the diplomatic community is, the progressive policies and the holistic policies that India is coming out with, like SAGAR. We have talked about the biodiversity plan also. All these things cumulatively will take us forward based on the strength we gain in the last dimension that you spoke of, and that's a very, very important lesson for all of us to take home and think about and research about. Thank you very much for sharing such valuable thoughts, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now to introduce and invite Admiral MP Muralidharan, Ati Visisht Seva Medal and Bar, now Sena Medal, for his keynote address. Admiral Muralidharan is an alumnus of the National Defence Academy. In his illustrious career spanning 4 decades, he has held several key appointments, including the command of the guided missile destroyer, that is INS Ranvijay. He was naval assistant to the Chief of Naval Staff, and he was also the naval attaché at the Embassy of India at Moscow. As a flag officer, he was flag officer commanding Maharashtra and Gujarat Naval Area, commandant of the Indian Naval Academy, and he was Chief of Personnel at Naval Headquarters before he took over as the 19th Director General of the Indian Coast Guard. After his retirement in 2013, He was appointed as member of the Armed Forces Tribunal at Kochi. We are all aware that the appointment is equivalent to that of a sitting judge of the High Court. He is a keen student. That's what he likes to say about himself. We all know his expertise level, but he says he is a keen student. So we should be student of students, actually, of strategic and defense related issues with a special focus on maritime affairs. He is a member of strategic studies societies and institutions, and he regularly contributes to professional journals and delivers expert talks in seminars and conferences. The Admiral was awarded the Ati Vishish Seva Medal twice by the President of India, and he is also the recipient of Nausena Medal. It's my privilege to invite Admiral Muralidharan for the keynote address. Sir.
Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan. Just allow me to share my screen.
Please, sir.
I hope we can see the screen now. Does it come up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At the outset, let me thank Professor Gurmeet Singh, the Vice Chancellor, and the UGC Center for Maritime Studies, Pondicherry University, as well as the Electronic Journal of Social and Strategic Studies for giving me an opportunity to be part of this webinar on a subject which is so vital for India's growth and economic development. I'm also very happy to be in the company of Ambassador Anil Tribunayat, Professor Raju, and Dr. Srinivasan, and many other distinguished participants and very young scholars. You heard very key points on the maritime issues, both from Professor Raju, Professor Gurmeet Singh, and Ambassador Tribunayat. While we'll see some more young scholars who are examining in depth the various maritime issues linked to the theme, I shall endeavor to take a broad overview of some of the key aspects. Now, as a mariner, it is always very thrilling to hear the 21st century is being spoken of as the century of the seas. And the reasons are very evident. Seaborne trade has been a vital component of world trade through ages, since it has been the cheapest mode of transport for conveying large volumes of cargo over long distances. The globalization of trade and commerce, increasing interlinking of economies, and the fact that bulk of trade takes place via maritime routes are further raised the relevance of the maritime domain. Additionally, dwindling resources on land is also compelling a relook at the oceans with their seemingly large untapped resources. As far as India is concerned, our quintessential maritime character and geostrategic location have always defined our growth as a nation over the centuries. Sardar K.M. Panikkar, strategic thinker and diplomat, who undoubtedly played a significant role in revival of maritime thinking in India, was very clear when he said, and I quote, "A peninsula washed on three sides by the Indian Ocean, she was from the earliest period of history a country with dominant interest on the sea." Now, archaeological evidence found at Mohenjo-daro indicates that even at the time of Indus Valley civilization, Indians had regular seafaring activities. You could see the old trade routes that are still going strong. The Rig Veda mentions sea voyages and as a prayer seeking the blessings of Lord Varuna, which says, "O Lord, take us in a ship across the oceans for our well-being." Incidentally, motto of the modern Indian Navy, Shamno Varuna, meaning "O Lord Varuna, be tranquil," is from Rig Veda. Manusmriti, the ancient legal script text, has provided for maritime trade rules. Now, Kautilya's Arthashastra, compiled over 2 million ago, indicates the post of a chief controller of ports and aspects of port dues and custom duties. Now, Arthashastra very clearly states that pilot ships and enemy ships violating territorial limits should be destroyed. Now, the Mauryan Empire had a border shipping to look after shipping related activities. However, in spite of such a long maritime tradition, there was a clear decline in maritime thinking and related activities in India by the end of the 13th century. This resulted in the European powers taking control of oceanic waters around India and eventually resulted in our colonization and loss of independence. Fortunately, there was a revival of maritime outlook in independent India. Significance of the maritime arena for India was very aptly put across by our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, while sailing on board Indian naval ship Mysore in 1958. And he said, "From this ship, I looked at India and thought of the country and its geographical situation. On three sides of it, there is sea, and on the fourth, high mountains. In a sense, our country may be said to be in the very lap of the oceans. In these circumstances, I pondered over our close links with the sea and how the sea has brought us together. From time immemorial, people of India had very intimate connection with the sea. They had trade with other countries and they had also built ships. Later, the country became weak. Now that we are free, we have once again realized the importance of the sea. We cannot afford to be weak at sea." Now, while this quotation is well known, something what Professor Gurmeet Singh triggered me to pull out something else, which actually not very many people know, that way back in 1955, Nehru actually wrote to his then defense minister, Mr. K.N. Kardju, and he actually said that not all land forces can protect us from sea attacks. The Air Force can protect us to some extent, but only to a very limited one just near our borders. The sea has no frontiers like the land which has it. India therefore has to play an important role in the ocean surrounding her. And he went on to say that I do not mean to say that we should presume control of these oceans. That's too big a task, but we should be strong enough to resist control by any other power. In fact, he had actually gone on to write about the types of ships that the Navy should have. And what is important, that he has stressed on the need for an aircraft carrier when he said, it's really a moving airstrip which can be sent anywhere and stationed anywhere. Its mere presence gives strength to the Navy and to our defense a strong position. It gives us a certain command over the area wherever it can reach. Now, geostrategic significance sees, which to some extent Ambassador Trignay touched upon, nearly 70% of the earth is covered by the sea, and 2/3 of its population lives within 100 miles of the coast. 150 of the 192 member states of the UN are coastal states, and nearly all major economic and industrial activities happen within about 200 kilometers of the coastline. Now, if you go further, 80% of the global trade by volume takes place by the sea, which is actually 70% by value. We have around 54,000 ships and about 14 million jobs of importance because of the maritime activities. And the total trade across the oceans is something like to the tune of $35,000 billion. Now, apart from transportation, the oceans are also a major source of food, which is fish, metals, now minerals and energy resources. Now, as natural resources on land deplete, as of now, technology for extracting minerals from the sea is quite expensive, but I'm sure in the years ahead, we'll find cheaper technologies and therefore resources from the deep sea, and they will be taken, which will further increase its importance. Now, in case of India, 90% of our trade by volume and 70% by value is by the sea. Now, our value of exports is about 300 billion and imports are worth about 450 billion, which about 750 billion is the total trade that we are having, which includes bulk of our oil, LNG, and that means the energy resource of the nation. As the Indian economy grows further, we are going to have more Indian shipping and ports will play a more significant role in our growth. Sorry. Another significant maritime issue for India was that towards the end of the 20th century, the world itself shifted from a Euro-Atlantic to a Euro-Pacific view, making this region critically important for all major powers. Now, if you see India's strategic positions virtually straddling the Indian Ocean at the base of the continent of Asia, from the top to all the choke points by which ships can enter this area, and mark those: the Cape of Good Hope, the Lombok and Sunda Straits, Straits of Malacca, Hormuz, and so on. So actually, we have a big control from the coast of Africa to East Asia and beyond into the Pacific Ocean. Now, it also gives us an added stake in the security and stability of waters of the Indo-Pacific, more so as we are located close to the largest source of oil and natural gas in the world, which is the Gulf nations and now the Central Asian states. Now, Indo-Pacific itself accounts for 60% of the world's GDP, 65% of the population, and 60% of the global maritime trade. Now, once you appreciate the importance of the maritime domain, the first thought that probably crosses is how do we ensure maritime security? It had become evident in the last few decades of the 20th century that there was a shift from the traditional confrontation of high seas to challenges in the littoral region, and more so towards non-conventional maritime security threats, which we also call the low-intensity maritime operations. They would include things like maritime terrorism, piracy, drug and human trafficking, gun running, poaching, or that is the illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, and more importantly, illegal gathering of sensitive economic and seismic data from our exclusive economic zones. Now, natural disasters can also have a catastrophic effect on all maritime activities and the environment as such. Many of these threats could emerge from a cut across political boundaries and even from non-state actors. This in turn would call for cooperation between all maritime nations to safeguard common maritime interests. Now, as far as India is concerned, apart from these conventional non-conventional threats, we also face conventional challenges. Like Pakistan continues to encourage terrorist elements that are inimical to India, and this remains one of the greatest threats to peace and stability in this region. It's also worth remembering that the critical energy needs of India flows from the Persian Gulf, and the normal traffic lanes pass very close to Pakistan. It is therefore susceptible to interdiction, not only during conflict, but also by the unconventional threats under the guise of terrorist elements which could be nurtured by Pakistan. Now, while China is not a literal state of the Indian Ocean region, now PLA Navy has been making very regular entry into the area. While as of now, China faces the problem of long distances from a major naval bases to Indian Ocean region, the so-called string of pearls and strategy of bases and diplomatic ties from Africa to Middle East and South Asia. You already know that he's got a base in Djibouti and he's looking for bases elsewhere. These are all for China to overcome the distance of our naval bases from a mainland into this area. While I do not foresee in immediate future any major conventional conflicts at sea, as it would harm the economic progress of almost all the nations in the area. But we have recently witnessed with China the confrontation along our land borders, which we still not settled. So therefore, we need to have regular patrolling and monitoring of maritime areas of interest, and more so the sea lanes through which our cargo passes, because this is a very, very constant challenge in the years ahead, even in peacetime. Now, this is something that was briefly touched upon. The environmental security is another issue that needs to be looked at. The Indian Ocean region has nearly 145,000 ships transiting in a year, about 13 to 15,000 per day. Now, any major oil spills are a very realistic possibility, as there could be collisions, groundings, or even damage to ships due to terrorist attacks. Now, spills from offshore oil platforms is also a possibility. Now, almost most here would recall that about 2 years ago, in fact, in September 2020, we had the case of the MT New Diamond of Sri Lanka, a super tanker which had an explosion and caught fire. Of course, it was brought into control by the joint efforts of the Sri Lankan and Indian maritime forces. Around the same time, some of you would recall that, in fact, a month earlier, there was a disastrous oil spill from a tanker called MV Wakashio of Mauritius, releasing nearly 1,000 tons of fuel oil into a very vital maritime reserve. Now, this was contained due to an extent by cooperative pollution control measures by lots of multiple agencies and nations. Now, these incidents actually serve as a reminder of the environmental challenges that we face, especially as Indian Ocean states, and we need to prepare. Now, this could be compounded by climate change. So any major oil or chemical spill or even dumping of toxic waste by passing ships would be disastrous for the environment and the livelihood of all those who depend on coastal zone for their sustenance. For many Indian Ocean countries, especially the island states, environmental securities are on top of their list, and they look to nations like India for support. Now, nature of these threats also mean that they can rarely be dealt with by a single nation. So, in order to achieve maritime security, what we need is something known as the maritime domain awareness, which has been defined by the International Maritime Organization as effective understanding of anything associated with maritime domain that could impact security, safety, economy, or even the environment. Now, it calls for collection, analysis, fusion, and timely dissemination of enormous quantities of data from diverse agencies ranging from, as has been symbolically shown in this, space-based surveillance, aerial recce, automatic tracking, and so on, to ensure maritime security and meet the challenges that they pose. The very nature of maritime domain makes it apparent that threats emerging in one section, more so the unconventional ones, could easily move from one to the other, and they don't recognize any political boundaries. Now, globalized linking of economies is further enhanced interdependence of nations. Therefore, cooperation between all stakeholders is necessary to safeguard common interests. Now, in order to enhance maritime awareness across the region, India took the initiative of setting up of International Fusion Center at Gurugram in December 2018. Now, we have currently linkages with 21 partner countries, and many of them have liaison officers posted at the center. And we also interact with 22 multinational agencies across the world to ensure surveillance of maritime spaces, which will now across the Indo-Pacific. Now, let me come to another topic of the blue economy or maritime economy. And it's been defined by World Bank as sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihood and jobs, and ocean ecosystem health. Now, we've also been using the terms as marine economy or coastal economy. In essence, it is effective and optimal use of natural marine resources in keeping with ecological limits. Now, coastal economy is focused on activities on around the coastal areas, and is a sum of all economic activities, including employment generation and output from the region. Now, marine economy would also include the aspects of seafood, marine transportation, coastal tourism and recreation, and infrastructure. While the importance of maritime related issues is slowly emerging on all the littoral nations, or rather we have started taking it more seriously, achieving blue economy goals of sustainable management of marine resources, there's something that the ambassador also touched upon, would require extensive cooperation between littoral nations. This is needed both at the governmental level as well as all the stakeholders operating the area, including the scientific and coastal communities. Now, you'll agree that any activity in the modern world is impacted by technology. Now, maritime world is also not new to technological changes. It has evolved from rowing and sailing vessels to steamships to nuclear powered ships and submarine. And in case of mercantile marine too, it has gone up from to high volume bulk carriers now from the older sail vessels that carried it, which can now today bulk carriers carry food grains, ore, etc. And the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development in 2017 expressed the view that new technologies are transforming the maritime transport industry and providing opportunity to improve economic efficiency, optimize logistics management systems, operations, and expand connectivity, including digital connectivity. While in the last 2 years, the pandemic situation severely disrupted global maritime activities like in most other sectors, it also gave a fillip to digitalization and environmental concern. Now, technological advancements have also been helping shipping and ports to continue operations even during with minimal contact. It also emerged that creation of new business opportunities calls for harnessing technology, and the maritime sector is now looking at what we call as 4.0 technologies to bring in greater innovation. We are having things like advanced analytics, improved onboard sensors, port call optimization, blockchain systems, big data, and we're also looking at autonomous ships that will redefine the way ships, ports, and their hinterland connections deliver cargo and services. This will also save time and cost of clearance and movement of cargo. Now, a key challenge, of course, will be to establish interoperability so that data can be exchanged seamlessly while ensuring at the same time cyber security and protection of sensitive data. Now, technological innovation, as I mentioned, has also brought in the prospect of automated crewless vessels or maritime autonomous surface ships. Now, some advanced nations are already trying this out for submarines and warships, and very soon this will probably come into the mercantile marine too. Now, let me come back to India's specific aspects. Now, the 21st century India clearly appreciates the importance of the sea, and revival of interest in oceanic matters started with the policy of SAGAR initiated by the government. Now, it is further amplified by a Prime Minister at the Shangri-La Dialogue in 2018 when he said, and I quote, "Oceans had an important place in Indian thinking since pre-Vedic times. The Indian Ocean has shaped much of India's history. It now holds key to our future. It is also the lifeline of global commerce." He went on to say that Indo-Pacific is a natural region, home to a vast array of global opportunities and challenges. And he said that I'm increasingly convinced that with each passing day, the destinies of those of us who live in this region are linked. We should all have equal access as a right under international law to use of common spaces on the sea and in the air, and would require freedom of navigation, unimpeded commerce, and peaceful settlement of disputes in accordance with international law. Now, again, Ambassador spoke of the international law and how we should utilize it. And the Prime Minister said that when we all agree to live by that code, our sea lanes will be pathways to prosperities and corridors of peace. We'll also be able to come together to prevent, now this is important, to prevent maritime crimes, preserve marine ecology, and protect against disasters and prosper from the blue economy. And he went on to say that our own engagement from the shores of Africa to that of Americas will be inclusive. We will promote a democratic and rules-based international order in which all nations, big and small, will thrive as a sovereign, as equal and sovereign nations. Now, in keeping with this vision, which is initiated by the Prime Minister and the concept of working together, in November 2019 at the East Asia Summit, we came with a very important proposal, namely the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, to manage, conserve, and sustain and secure the maritime domain. Essentially, it has got 8 pillars of maritime security, ecology, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, disaster and risk reduction and management, science, technology, and academic cooperation, and trade connectivity. Now, this is a very important proposal. We already started interacting with many countries. Australia was one of the first to come forward, and many other countries are sharing. So this actually calls for cooperative mechanism by which we can go on. And our plans in the coming years was very clearly spelled out. The Ambassador mentioned this at the Maritime India Summit in 2021, where the Prime Minister, while addressing said that India is very serious about growing in the maritime sector and emerging as a leading blue economy. Focus includes upgrading of current infrastructure, creation of next generation infrastructure. And instead of piecemeal approach, he said that we will focus on the entire sector as one, with an upgraded port community system for easy data flow. Spoke of major investment that we are planning to do in storage facilities, ports, and also to connect connectivity by integrating ports with coastal economic zones, port-based smart cities, and digital park. And in fact, he further said that the Maritime India vision had been launched. So we said we want to share the best practices with the world, and we are open to learning from the best practices in the world. Continuing with the focus on trade and economic linkages with BIMSTEC and IOR nation, India plans to enhance investment in infrastructure and facilitate mutual agreements by 2026. He further spoke, and this is important, of in promoting renewable source of energy in the maritime sector by installing solar and wind power systems at all major ports to increase the usage of renewable energy to more than 60% of the energy consumed by about 2030. Now, in keeping with the vision, we are also planning to develop mega ports with world-class infrastructure at the Vadhavan, Paradeep, and the Deen Dayal port in Kandla. We want to operationalize 23 domestic waterways, which would make transportation more environment friendly. And all this is planned by 2030. We are also planning an Eastern Waterways Connectivity Transport Grid, which will improve regional connectivity with Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Myanmar, which will further regional trade and cooperation. Now, Ministry of Shipping, Ports and Waterways is also focusing on improving maritime shipping and navigation, education and training for mercantile marine, shipbuilding and repair industries, shipbreaking, fishing vessels industry, and the entire floating craft industry, if you may call it. There are close to 400 projects on the anvil with investment potential of about $31 billion. And the Sagarmala project for promoting port-led development announced by the government in 2016 has again got about 574 projects at a cost of about 82 billion and implementation by 2035. Now, let me sum up thoughts on this National Maritime Day by saying that India is a maritime nation and our prosperity and development are intrinsically linked to the seas. So long as we use the oceans effectively, it was a land of prosperity and enormous wealth. After the neglect of the seas from around the 14th century, there was a revival of maritime outlook in post-independence India, which is now being pursued in the 21st century with even greater vigor. Initiatives such as the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, the SAGAR, IPOI, the Quad, BIMSTEC, Milan, and many other bilateral and multilateral agreements, exercises, and dialogues and symposium are all pointers towards this. Now, blessed as we are with a strategic location in the Indo-Pacific, where the destiny of the world would be played out in the 21st century, our maritime thoughts and policies should continue to focus on development of all elements of maritime power. And by this, I would include that, even our academic fraternity, which is thinking about it, can always give newer ideas, float new ideas, give better proposals with their studies. Now, both our maritime forces, the Navy and the Coast Guard, have always played a significant role in enhancing India's connect and reach among maritime nations. And they continue to do so by bilateral, multilateral exercises, and also increase and expand our Indian presence and visibility all along the Indo-Pacific. Let me conclude by reiterating the words of Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Maritime India Summit. He said, India is very serious about growing in the maritime sector and emerging as a leading blue economy of the world. Let me also recall the words of Sardar K.M. Panikkar, which is very prophetic, when he said that the future of India will undoubtedly be decided in the sea. Now, here pictorially, while we have this primary area of interest, which is very close to our shores, you can see the larger area where Indian interests are focused or what we should be looking at in the years ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. In fact, you covered practically every single dimension that is there for India's maritime concern. You started with traditional threats, then you went on to non-traditional threats by pointing out to the ship mishap which happened near Sri Lanka. You addressed the environmental concerns. Then you talked about the biodiversity angle. Then, more importantly, in my opinion, for the researchers and scholars present here, you talked about the 21 nation initiative, the Prime Minister's 8-point agenda for maritime domain, and the new Maritime Vision 2030. I think you have covered the whole perspective in such a short time. And I'm very confident that the scholars who have listened to you will have much more points to work on now, because such a comprehensive understanding of all dimensions which are involved is necessary for any good, fruitful research that will lead to good policy. Thank you very much for sharing such wonderful thoughts, sir. With your permission, and from permission of Professor Raju, I will now step on to the webinar session. And I'm especially happy to inform you, sir, that we have 3 young scholars, 3 student scholars who are going to present their views based on their research on 3 different dimensions concerning the maritime affairs that we are talking about in this webinar today. First, before I call upon the first speaker, my request to all the audience is, if you have questions or if you have points to highlight, please post them in the chat box. I will endeavor to take it after all the 3 presentations are over. Please do not interrupt any presenter when he or she is talking. Thank you very much. First, I would like to call upon Girishankar SB, who is a research scholar in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. Girishankar is going to talk to us about one of the dimensions that the Admiral touched upon: cartels, drug trafficking, and maritime security challenges to India via Arabian Sea. Girishankar, you have 20 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Just allow me to share my screen, sir.
Please.
Sir, I think now my screen is visible, right?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Sir, at the outset, I want to thank the panelists, conference chair, faculties, Vice Chancellor, Pondicherry University Ambassador, and other distinguished guests. I'm Girish Shankar, Doctor Fellow at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. And it's my honor to present my paper titled The Cartels, Drug Trafficking, and Maritime Security Challenges to India via the Arabian Sea, at the platform provided by EJSSS Maritime Center and the Electronic Journal for Social and Security Studies. Now, I'll just be quick on this. The research will explore the illegal maritime drug trafficking route via the Arabian Sea and its impact on India's national security. And the research relevance lies as the cases of illicit seizure in the Arabian Sea and along the Indian coast have seen an unprecedented increase over the years. And research also explores into the drug transit hubs along the Indian coast. And finally, the research highlights the complications with the international law and highlights the coordination that is needed between the Indian agencies, mainly the Narcotics Control Bureau and Maritime Enforcement Agencies, to tackle the scourge of this narcotic proliferation to maritime. So now let me start with the Indian Maritime Doctrine. The Indian Maritime Doctrine characterizes maritime security as freedom from threats or from the sea. However, this may not be the useful as a definition, as it firstly lacks a framework for whom and from whom. And secondly, it doesn't describe the metrics that may be used to describe the presence or absence of threats. And thirdly, it put forward a maritime security as a state of being rather than a persistent effort that is normally most visible in times of threat. And thus, in the absence of national definition, there is a lack of consensus among the Indian governmental departments on what actually security entails. I'll give you an example. The lack of this lack of common framework for maritime security are often resulted in resistance that may be perceived as encroaching upon the authority of a department or an agency. For example, the Defense Ministry's proposal for fitment of radio identification transponders on Indian fishing ports met significant opposition from the Fisheries Department, as their perspective of maritime security is to fish without restriction. And to the Defense Ministry, it was able to identify all the vessels operating off the Indian coast at all times. And thus a national definition would be able to provide a strategic context, allowing different stakeholders to see how their role in the system could enable to attain the national objectives and interest. And in this absence of efforts of one agency are often viewed as zero-sum proposition by others. And the proof of this lies as 3 successive ministries of shipping and transport have in a period of just 7 years issued 3 maritime plans, and latest being the Maritime Agenda 2020 issued in 2010. It is therefore much very necessary for our decision makers to appreciate that maritime security must be viewed in a holistic manner. Keeping that in mind, I wish to stress Sun Tzu's word that nature of war is in a constant change. And India, placed between the major drug-producing regions of the world, Golden Crescent and Golden Triangle, often faces an undeniable impact of drug trafficking. And according to 2018 annual report of International Narcotics Control Board, India is rising as a major illicit drug trade country. And it is also located in one of the busiest maritime traffic regions of the world, with perhaps the highest density of fishing vessels in territorial waters. And the American presidential determination on major illicit drug producing countries for financial year 2022 has also put India, along with the South Asian neighbors, among the list of 21 countries that are major drug producing or transit nations. And when it comes to drug transit from the Crescent, the illicit drug manufacturing gangs have spread from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran, with linkages to Gujarat, Kashmir, Punjab, and Mumbai. The Afghan cartel now uses a spice trade route between India and Afghanistan to spread the narcotics network. And though the heroin in its pure form is odorless, I think without smell, with smell, and to avoid suspicion at the borders, they use jute bags, which are used to carry spices. And this jute bags is soaked and dried with heroin, and spices like cumin and basil are added to it so that even sniff dogs cannot trace it. And this then is covered with a plastic bag and a gunny bag on top of it. And the strong aroma of the added elements will overpower even the hint of any heroin odor. And the consignments are then moved from Herat in Afghanistan to Bandar Abbas port in Iran, and finally made its way to the Mumbai via sea. And in the east, they transit to southern road, either the South Asian countries, including India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives, to reach further destination. Moreover, along being the primary heroin trafficker nation, Afghanistan is also emerging as a country of concern with regard to synthetic drugs. Especially a drug called K tablet. This has been in the market for now, and it's now a fashion to say that opium is nothing, hashish is nothing, all anyone wants is to do K. And from 2019, the major shift in narcotics has been observed across the Arabian Sea. And to bypass the heavy security checks along international borders, it is smuggled by sea. And due to the smugglers also know that the sea area is more helpful for them to smuggle these heroin. And tons of heroin, crystal meth, and hashish has been recovered from the stateless boats in Arabian Sea, which has an undeniable link to Pakistan. And substantial increase in sea-based drug trafficking is problematic for India on several fronts. Firstly, India is emerging as major destination for narcotics. And secondly, this trend implies that our coasts remain vulnerable to the possibility of narco-terrorism attacks. Just this year, in February, the NCB, in association with the Indian Navy, has secured 800 kilogram of drugs worth rupees 2,000 crore from a vessel tracked in the high seas of Gujarat, beyond India's exclusive economic zone. And after the seizure, NCB Director S.N. Prathapan sir made a statement that it is the first operation in NCB's history or any other investigation agency when the seizure has to be made in high seas. Also, the post-second wave of COVID-19, Gujarat coast has also witnessed an increase in narcotic smuggling across the state. Arrests made by Gujarat anti-terrorist squad have exposed that Pakistan drug dealers believed to be enjoying the patronage of security agencies, mainly the ISI, bring consignments in shops up to 150 nautical miles from Mandvi, from where it will be picked up by the locals and brought to the coast via small ports. Even at the Adani port, seizures were 21,000 crores has been made. And along with the narcotics, Indian Coast Guard also found AK-47 and 1,000 rounds of ammunition during the narcotic seizure made in the stateless boats traveled by the Sri Lankan nationals. And also, interestingly, the exchanges don't know among them as arrested person have said an unknown vessel carried the consignment from Chabahar port in Iran and handed the same to them near the high seas in Lakshadweep. And the Narcotics Control Board made a statement that Pakistan ISA is using the network of Dawood gang to smuggle narcotics in Gujarat. And now in the wake of 1993 blast, India stepped up efforts to Operation Swan to prevent illegal infiltration along with the Maharashtra and Gujarat coast. But clearly these were not enough to prevent the 2008 terrorist attack that once again came through the sea road via Mumbai. Subsequently, Indian government began a major efforts to upgrade the police force of various Indian states. The effectiveness of it can be seen during the recent seizures. And it should be highlighted that Gujarat government has admitted that it is facing many maritime issues owing to this long coastline, and its heroin seizures have also increased. And Gujarat government also proposed that Indian coast must include drone coastal surveillance for interceptions. And the national government and the state government have also been playing a crucial role when it comes to the drug seizures. And the cooperation, there is a much more cooperation that is needed between the Indian agencies. And to spot a container, actually it needed a lot of coordination between the agencies. And it is not easy because Indian agencies has to work consequently with each other and also transfer the resources and intelligence resources. And events of 2008 November fortunately led to a complete restructuring of national coastal security with clearly defined responsibilities. The Navy was named as lead agency for maritime security with greater civilian oversight to enable the inter-agency cooperation. And however, there are still challenges that need to be addressed, stressing the cooperation needed between the maritime agencies. The consignments that comes in port makes it difficult for agencies to check as they are sealed. Thus, to spot a suspect container requires a huge intelligence build of data analytics and serious coordination between the multiple enforcement agencies. So the seizure at Nidra port just happened now is a classic example of all things working together. For a better coordination among agencies, the government of India in 2016 set up the Narco Coordination Center, which is a positive step. And yes, the conventions can be tricky, and the law of conventions of seas 1982 seeks cooperation of suppression of illicit drug trafficking in narcotic drugs. But this permission doesn't allow for boarding vessels flying in the flag of another state. Thus, unless there is a streamlined process for asking for and receiving Iranian or Pakistani consent to board suspected drug trafficking boats claiming their nationality, the capacity of enforcement agent to take any actions at high seas is limited. Now, the stateless doves are becoming a big security concern for security agencies worldwide. However, on a positive note, the law of sea also has a specific section that it allows to board suspected unflagged vessel, and in order to check their nationality. And it is the drug that is discovered during this process that has been seized by the Combined Task Force 150 and a naval coalition of 9 countries to pursue the global war of terrorism. However, without further authorization, most states are unwilling to assert any additional jurisdiction over the vessels beyond such seizures. And the stateless boats, mainly those, are consequently often simply sent on the way. And also during the boarding operation by law enforcement agencies on high seas, the crew of such vessel has been found mainly Pakistani and occasionally of Iranian origin with fake identity. Now, for the foreseeable future, the high seas maritime law enforcement response to the Indian Ocean heroin route is likely to remain focused upon seizures from these unflagged stateless boats. Another option that I would like to propose is leveraging of the existing UN Security Council resolutions and conventions regarding terrorist funding and create appropriate authorization for extended seizure operations against vessels suspected of facilitating Taliban funding via the involvement in the heroin route. Which can thus help in seizures in the Arabian Sea, of course. And now, given the India's vast coastline spanning across more than a dozen states and not so friendly neighborhood, India has to remain vigilant through threats via sea routes. It is no surprise that with the early US withdrawal from Afghanistan and the narco economy thriving in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region has witnessed an increasing in the smuggling activities. And this impact of pandemic on the Pakistan's economy may have also contributed to Pakistan's renewed boost to smuggle narcotics over this established maritime routes in Indian Ocean. And as the land trafficking routes has become much more difficult with the cooperations with Indian agencies and with the strict vigilance, it is likely that the maritime route will continue to grow. And the magnitude of fund involved in the sale of these drugs would probably be used for financing terror activities. And this calls for a greater vigilance and coordination among security agents that highlighted by our Home Minister Amit Shah. And also, as a major step to increase coordination among agencies, appointment of Vice Admiral G. Ashok Kumar Sar as first National Maritime Security Coordinator is a positive step. Why I say so? Because despite improvement in coastal security and coordination between maritime agencies, state governments at large has been unwilling to play a bigger role in the coastal security, from low number of marine police stations to underutilization of patrol boats for coastal tasks and absence of shore-based infrastructure. Can be rectified only through this National Maritime Security Coordinator. And this National Maritime Security Coordinator's immediate task will be to find ways to bridge all this deficit. And Prime Minister of India has also highlighted the centrality of maritime domain in India's future development, which further emphasizes the needs for a holistic and coordinated approach to maritime security. And thank you for your time and patience. Questions I can take at the end of the session if you want.
Thank you, Girishankar. I compliment you for a very comprehensive presentation on the not only dimensions, not only the volume, but the implication of this drug trafficking from the point of view of the society, from the point of view of security. And very important point that thing you were highlighting and which needs to be highlighted is the coordination among multifarious agencies to achieve the kind of security or balance in security that we need to achieve in the Indian Ocean region, Arabian Sea in particular. Thank you very much for a good presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call upon, please questions, post it in the chat box, or points, you please post it in the chat box. I will address it to the respective speaker, or even I'll take the indulgence of asking our admiral to comment on them. Of course, Professor Raju also. And I have the pleasure now of inviting Chetali Kohli, who's a research intern with Defense Research and Studies, a Kochi-based think tank. Chetali is going to talk to us about changing economic imperatives in the Indian and Indo-Pacific Oceans. Chetali, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm here to discuss on the topic changing economic imperatives in the Indian and Indo-Pacific Ocean. Let us take the recent situation of Bab al-Mandeb and halt of trade via Suez Canal. It took no time to shook the world's economic market. The direct impact was on the substantial increase in the total energy cost and world energy prices. For instance, any disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz or Strait of Malacca with no alternative shipping route can lead to massive vulnerable situation among the nations. As per US Energy Information Administration, 30% of global oil trade and 30% of global LNG trade moves through Strait of Hormuz. Hence, any disruptions may lead to food and political instability to the food import-dependent countries in the world. Due to the technological advancement, the world is now more linked than ever, and nations are highly dependent on other nations for resources. Thus, interruptions at any of the world's key maritime choke points can have devastating effects on the global trade and economy. For example, farmers could restrict access to markets, global food and energy sector would collapse, shipping and logistic companies could increase costs, humanitarian agencies could face difficulties in supplying food aid. Shipments would be delayed or cancelled. India's unique maritime geography, with a central location and reach across the Indian Ocean, which is hub of global trade and commerce. Indian Ocean serves as the gateway to the world's shipping transit. On the other side, Indo-Pacific, being home to 65% of the world's population, witnesses 46% of the world's merchandise trade. Thus, the way India is placed in the Indian Oceanic region gives it advantageous positions in the international shipping lanes, guided by various choke points. 80% of the country's crude oil requirements are imported by sea, is met through international shipping lanes. For India to achieve security in the choke points, it is important to build economic relations with those sharing common boundaries of our maritime space. This is reflected in the Look East policy, an instrument in India's diplomatic outreach to countries in East, Southeast Asia, particularly with ASEAN member countries. This was transformed into its Act East policy to expand relations to East across the Indo-Pacific. It is projected in the India's vision of SAGAR, security and growth for all in the region, to strengthen economic relations and development in the maritime space. India, with its maritime neighbors, have emphasized on the importance of maritime security for national development. Thus, to achieve the vision of freedom of use of seas, it is crucial to ensure that seas remain secure. India's dependence on seas for national development expands across energy security, seaborne trade, and shipping and fishing. Therefore, India relies on seas for its external trade and energy needs, which include crude and liquefied hydrocarbon imports, export of refined products, offshore development, economic partnership across the world. For instance, it is estimated that gross petroleum imports accounted for over 19% of India's total imports in 2020-21. Thus, the growing volume of crude oil imports possesses risk for India's energy security, as large volume of oil reserves and most of its oil imports are concentrated in the Persian Gulf. So, if any political instability in the Persian Gulf region would disrupt the oil supply in the world, the recent cases experienced like fire shots at cargo ship by Iran in 2015 in the Strait of Hormuz, another case of missile launched by Yemen coast that damaged the UAE military ship, thus also pivotal role to the security of India's sea lanes of communication to achieve energy security. Increased focus should be on safety and security of seaborne trade and energy routes, specifically in the Indian Ocean region, considering their effects on global economic and India's national interests. Importance of maintaining freedom of navigation and strengthening the international law regime under the United Nations Convention on the Laws of Seas. Cooperation and coordination between various navies to counter threats at seas. For instance, Japan-US-India Trilateral Dialogue 2015 welcomed Japan as a participant in the Malabar exercise. In 2019, India and Indonesia Trilateral led naval workshop based on maritime security in the Indian Ocean region. In 2021, Australia-Japan-India Trilateral made agreements on developing joint maritime projects, including naval cooperation. Importance of SLOCs to nation may vary as per its geography and dependence on specific routes, both for transportation of essential commodities and for conduct of maritime operations. The islands in the Indian Ocean play vital role along the sea lines of communication, giving easy access to naval presence and allowing them to patrol and secure SLOCs during the time of peace and war. The Indian Ocean acts as an intersection for the transport of oil from the Middle East as well as from the Persian Gulf in the northern India. Ocean plays an important role for the safety and security of sea lines of communication that has become a key part of India's national interest. The main aim of India is to protect sea lines of communication along international shipping lanes to ensure safety, security, and freedom of navigation that assumes high international importance. The Indian Navy has warships deployed in the Gulf of Oman and Persian Gulf due to increase in Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean, followed with more investments in ports and special economic zones. For instance, India has handed over the offshore petrol vessel Varuna to Sri Lanka, and its recent aid of $1 billion credit line to Sri Lanka is in line to boost its ties with its neighbors. Apart from this, Indian Navy has received permission to use Port Ihola in the Madagascar island to keep check on disaster management, which coincides with the vision of SAGAR. To achieve the vision of safety and security in the maritime space, it is important to safeguard various choke points. Indian shipping industry is set to grow, which indicates that our dependence on foreign shipping would continue over the years. The significant presence of Indian nationals in the international seafaring community operating on both Indian and foreign ships. 6.6% of world merchant navy being Indian clearly shows that India's naval soft power is exercising huge role both in India and overseas. Overall safety and security of Indian seaborne trade and seafarers on both Indian and foreign ships require international shipping routes to remain safe, secure, and free for navigation and legitimate use. Thus, deployment of ports play an important role in the overall economic development of the country. Port serves as a trade hub where seas and land routes meet and cargo moves from one medium to the other. India has 12 major and 200 non-major ports, and more being developed under India's Sagarmala project, which is estimated to boost nation's GDP growth by 2%. The complexity of partnerships offered by the Indian Ocean has created strategic dynamics in this huge strategic space. Different players have been involved in the Indian Ocean, from the United States, who continue to maintain a military base in the Chagos Island, to France, which is connected due to the French-speaking islands of the Indian Ocean. However, the 21st century has seen the emergence of China at the front to grab the opportunity to interact with the island countries of the Indian Ocean. The growing relationship with the Indian Ocean rim countries is seen as a string of pearls strategy to contain the growth of China. However, it is essential to note that emerging India will face countermeasures from the aggressive Chinese foreign policy. Apart from France, Japan, and the US, China set up its overseas military facility in Djibouti in 2017. Therefore, India needs to set up a strong base as a security provider in the region to counter the other regional players in the Indian Ocean. In response, India has already improved its naval and security ties with Southeast and East Asian countries and other strategic powers. The revival of the Chinese maritime Silk Route can be seen through China's investment in the port of Hambantota in Sri Lanka, with Beijing control through debt trap lending, and the development of Pakistan's Gwadar port as part of China's Pakistan Economic Corridor. In the Maldives, China has financed the Chinese-Maldives Friendship Bridge. Apart from the China, there are other silent players who are silently challenging the geostrategic space in the Indian Ocean, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. The recent setup of the naval base in Sudan by Russia, which provides it with access to Bab al-Mandeb, which is one of the strategic choke points in the Indian Ocean. Apart from China, other silent players are silently challenging the geostrategic space in the Indian Ocean, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. The Indian Ocean shares area of 20% of the world oceans, connecting the shores of 36 countries. Hence, the majority of its exports and imports happen across the sea lanes of communication over the Indian Ocean and Indo-Pacific Ocean. Therefore, it is essential to secure the sea lanes of communication by maintaining freedom of navigation and information sharing. As per the United Nations Convention Laws of Seas, India maintains a status for freedom of navigation and security of SLOCs. India since 1995 has organized Milan exercise to take an active part in this geostrategic space without being bordered with the presence of powers like US, China or Russia. It will be a test for India to deepen its ties and engagement, particularly with the island states and with other like-minded countries. It seeks to engage with China on mutual trust and respect and sensitivity for each other's concerns. The second challenge is the institutional arrangements in the maritime space, which has seen divergent approaches and different national interests. The daunting challenge is to build an effective institutional mechanism for promoting open and inclusive maritime space for navigation and trade, while promoting collective economic gains from the economic resources and at the same time countering common security threats in the region. The institutionalization of the maritime space is possible only when, with the other major powers, India is seen as a net provider for formulating a common strategy that is in line with their national interests, that will promote peace, security, and prosperity in the region. India's Act East policy acts as a catalyst to develop a close vicinity with the regional and extra-regional countries for strategic partnership. The third challenge lies in the emergence of threats to security, such as piracy, drugs, human trafficking, terrorism, and climate change. Piracy has seen surge rise in the maritime areas, specifically in the Somalia Basin, where various stakeholders are involved pushing away their maritime zones. Robust actions have led to sharp reduction in Somalia piracy threat, but continued threat lies in the island states of Asia and Africa. The use of unregulated movements at sea for seaborne trafficking in narcotics and arms remain a constant threat for India, with the Golden Crescent to the west and Golden Triangle to its east. Another important issue is the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, which has led to continuous tension in the Pal Bay Strait between fishermen of India and Sri Lanka. India needs to address these challenges by working on cooperative mechanisms to address these issues to avoid instability and disruptions in the region. The other challenge is the arrangement of the unnamed unwatered zones, specifically in the exclusive economic zones of the country, that have an edge to threaten warships on the open seas. Therefore, it is crucial to enforce domestic and international laws that protect the open seas, freedom and security. At last, I would recommend few policies recommendations for my paper analysis. The first being understanding of disruptive threats on maritime choke points will need a wide range of mechanisms to build strong maritime trade over the world, and it reduce vulnerable situations to maritime choke points. Some of the recommendations for mitigation of risk in the choke points can be to develop infrastructure facilities and cooperative mechanisms to ensure uninterrupted maritime trade through choke points. To maintain uninterrupted global energy requirement, it is proposed to establish pipelines to avoiding of an unexpected disruptive threat. Building and nurturing strong relations with its neighbors. For instance, the recent financial assistance of $2.4 billion to Sri Lanka and additional assistance of $1 billion demanded by Sri Lanka. In addition to this, the recent assistance to Maldives of $2.6 billion in terms of grant to build strong bilateral relations is in the right direction for future cooperation. At last, I would conclude in the words of Sir Walter: "He who rules the sea controls the commerce of the world, and thus the riches of the world itself." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, Chitali, we are indeed very delighted to hear a young scholar cogently putting across the points which are important for not only safeguarding not only promoting, but I will say advancing India's economic imperatives in the Indo-Pacific region. You brought out the criticality of the sea lanes of communication and therefore the importance of freedom of navigation. You have brought out the criticality of the infrastructure development that is required. You have also brought out the importance of policy and institutional cooperation and coordination, not only inside the country, but also with all like-minded countries, I'll put it that way, like-minded countries in the region. And I think these points are worth not only mere contemplation, they will be debated, I'm hopeful, by all the scholars who are present here. Thank you very much for a good presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's my pleasure to invite Vrinda Arvind. Okay, Vrinda Arvind is a research associate with Pragya Center for Research. She works with me, if I may say so. And she is going to talk to us about the impact of coastal and marine tourism on Indian coastal reefs. Vrinda Arvind, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Allow me a moment to start the presentation.
Please.
Good morning, all. The title of my paper is Impact of Coastal and Marine Tourism on Indian Coral Reefs. So I have divided my paper into 6 subunits, as you can see here. So moving on to the next slide. So tourism is the 3rd largest sector in international trade, accounting for 10.4% of GDP and supporting 313 million jobs worldwide, and thereby a notable channel of economic development and socio-political change we see in the contemporary world. So there is an ever-growing interest among scholars of tourism studies to trace the pattern of social motives and activities of tourists. Taking tourists as his subjects to explain the psychosocial motives of tourism, Dr. McKennell crafted an ethnography of modern society. Here, the modern society is characterized by feelings of alienation and superficiality. In this regard, the tourist in search for authentic experiences that are depictions of the primitive, the natural, or that which is untouched by modernity. And this explains the recent rise in tourism, shifting towards more exotic third world destinations that fulfill these promises of the primitive and the natural destination, along with cheap prices. Now, coming to the importance of ocean-based industries, marine tourism is the 2nd most significant sector of the ocean economy after oil and gas exploration. Many times, marine tourism is interchangeably used with coastal tourism, but there is a slight difference, there is a little difference between the two. Coastal tourism refers to the full range of tourist recreational activities that occur in the coastal areas and coastal waters, while marine tourism includes activities in the marine environment, including activities like scuba diving, fishing, sailing, etc. So increase in these activities with an increase in marine and coastal tourism have raised possibilities of exploitation of marine ecosystems. Now, next slide. And this has resulted in international consensus that exploitation of marine resources and marine ecosystem must be counterbalanced by their protection. The same got wide attention globally that led to the inclusion of Sustainable Development Goal 14, which commits member states to conserve marine resources and marine ecosystem. So against this backdrop, The paper explores how India, being the host country, is faced with challenges to protecting its wealth of coral reef ecosystem with rising marine tourism. Okay, now the second subheading of the paper is coral reef ecosystem and biodiversity. So it is very crucial to understand about coral reefs more in order to understand why they are valuable and why they are distinct ecosystems apart from other marine ecosystems. So to begin with, coral reef formation, it takes millions of years literally for coral reef to form. Coral reefs are very ancient invertebrates that they are still fighting against getting extinct. Now, if I very briefly explain its formation, corals start their life as coral polyps in the form of free-swimming larva, which then attaches itself to the skeletal remains of the dead corals. And then it forms a symbiotic relationship with a certain algae and continues to grow and create the reef structure. Now, the second important feature of this ecosystem is that there is a mutualistic relationship between each and every organism in the coral ecosystem. This type of complex interdependent relationship is found in the whole of the coral reef. So this makes extinction of one species of flora or fauna resulting in threat to the other species in the ecosystem. Now, the third distinct feature is that coral reefs are home to a variety of biodiversity in flora and fauna. Some of them are very specific to the coral reefs. So thus, threat to coral reefs result in threat to the marine biodiversity at large. Now, I have some beautiful pictures of biodiversity found here. Now, sharing an interesting...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Your slides are not online.
Okay, sir. So give me a moment, sir, please. Sir, is it visible now?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, so this is the first slide. I'll move to the slide where I was talking about so that no time is wasted. So is it moving now, the slide?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so. So this is where I was talking about. I have these beautiful pictures of biodiversity found here. Now, an interesting fact is that coral reefs cover less than 0.2% of the Earth's surface, but suppose 25% of all marine species. So these are some of the facts about the Indian coral reefs. We have 5,790 square kilometer of coral reef formation. They are mainly found in Gulf of Kutch and Gulf of Mannar. Now, Gulf of Mannar is a designated biosphere reserve under UNESCO's Man and Biosphere program. In addition, coral reef patches can be found in Malvan Coast, Nethrani Islands near Mangalore Coast. They can also be seen in Lakshadweep and Andaman Nicobar Islands. So these are some of the places where Indian coral reefs can be found. Now, coming to why coral reefs are important to India. So there are 4 major areas where India can draw maximum benefit out of its reef structure. The first one is economic value. So healthy coral reefs support fisheries as well as create jobs and business that support tourism. For example, the value of US fisheries from coral reef is over 100 million. So sadly, we don't have this kind of data in India because we are neither interested in seriously protecting or researching or benefiting from these coral reefs. And second important factor is that protection and shelter given to marine biodiversity. Now, coral reefs are home to 1/4 of all marine species, 25% of all marine species. So besides coral reefs, can also act as food resource. If kept healthy and pollution-free, these reefs can yield up to 15 tons of fish, mollusks, and other invertebrates. The third importance is now coral reefs are sometimes called the medicine cabinets of the 21st century. Coral reef plants and animal extracts are important source of new medicine and for research to treat heart diseases, arthritis, cancer, etc. So coral reefs have a huge research and medicinal potential. So in future, coral reef ecosystem could represent an increasingly important source of medical treatments, nutritional supplements, cosmetics, and other commercial products. Now, the fourth importance is that coral reef act as natural shoreline buffer and prevent coastal erosion. This is how it works. So coral reef structures buffer shoreline against energy from waves, storms, and floods. It acts as an effective barrier, helping to prevent loss of life, property damage, and erosion. So if coral reefs disappear, in the absence of these natural barriers, it can cause a huge damage to coastal communities. Now, this also reduces coastal erosion. So you can see that this is so effective that man imitates these natural reef barriers by immersing concrete structures along some of the fragile coast to serve the same purpose. Now, this section is about how threats to marine coral reef, some of the common threats. Now, this section is about how marine and coastal tourism contribute to decreasing coral reef, which are its cause and effects. Human disturbances like overfishing, ornamental fish trade, collecting live corals for aquarium markets are some of the disturbance to coral reefs. But the major threat comes from marine tourism and activities associated with it, like scuba diving, sailing, etc., that pollute the environment by a very huge degree. Now, the second point is how discussing the major effects of these. Actually, coral reefs are also known as water filters of ocean. That is, they consume particles from water that surround them and exhale clean water. So the filtration then enhances the clarity and quality of ocean water. But the problem is that the ocean today is much dirtier now than when these simple organisms first evolved. The amount of plastics, microplastics, and chemicals released due to tourism affect coral reefs' health. So as the coral reefs take in so much of these toxins and exhale clean water, this process corrects their body over time. So without corals to filter water and clean it up, our beaches and reefs will continue to succumb to pollution. The third important point is untreated waste disposal from resorts and hotels around the coastal zones, which cause a huge problem and cause coral degradation. Fourth thing is cruise tourism. Cruise tourism is one of the specialities of Indian coastal and marine tourism. Untreated sewage waste and effluents from them getting dumped into the water is a major threat. So these effluents also introduced pathogens to water, affecting marine ecosystem of the coral reefs. So ecotourism. Ecotourism is the only viable solution to all these problems of pollution caused by marine and coastal tourism. So if the reefs are managed in a sustainable manner by promoting ecotourism, it can provide great returns to the future of Indian tourism industry. So to summarize my presentation, to take a few takeaways from the presentations. So the first point that I discussed is that coastal and marine tourism are the second most leading sector of the ocean economy after oil and gas exploration. Second point is that there is an exponential increase in coastal and marine tourism in India. And the thirdly, the most important factor or the link is that increase in tourism has negative correlation with the health and life of coral depletion, coral reefs. And depletion of coral reefs threaten marine biodiversity, medicine, research, and research associated with it, and affect tourism sector too. Fifth point is that ecotourism should be mandatorily adopted as a measure to prevent further coral depletion. Thus, India needs to come with more regulatory policies, research and coral reef management initiative, much like that of US and Australia, how they do, to effectively regulate pollution caused by unregulated tourism methods. Thank you all. So this is all about my presentation.
Thank you, Vrinda. In fact, you have brought out not just the importance of the coral reefs to the marine ecology, you have also highlighted the importance in preventing coastal erosion by protecting the coral reefs. Yes, as you pointed out, it contributes tremendously to tourism, and that very tourism is contributing plastics and pollution to the ocean bodies, in turn affecting the coral reefs negatively. Therefore, as you said, there has to be a policy orientation in order to address this issue, like some of the countries you pointed out, like America or Australia, not only to protect our coral reef regions, but also to promote sustainable tourism, which will be economically beneficial to the community, but ecologically beneficial to the earth, if I may put it that way. Thank you very much. Good points. And ladies and gentlemen, with this, thank you, sir. With this three presentations, we come to the end of this seminar. I do see one comment on this thing from Vimal Mohapatra. If he is online, you're welcome to voice it yourself.
I'm there.
Yeah, please.
I'm there, sir. This question already I have given in the chat box. You can check it.
Yeah, you're most welcome to state. Yeah.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you for inviting me for asking questions related to blue water navy. Already it is there. See, I wanted to know whether India has reached the position of whether it is brown water navy or green water navy, and if, as per the recent developed maritime doctrine of India, whether India has a plan to be a blue water navy in near future, or as per the present growth of Indian Navy, how much time it will take to be blue water navy? These are my questions, please. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Sir, your question is towards me or?
Anybody who can answer these questions?
No, one. Girishankar, I'll just take one small liberty, because the question is about the time frame. Probably nobody can actually say that 5 years, 6 years. Okay, 2027 we will be, because there are so many other factors which are involved. But in my opinion, the most appropriate person to give indicative answer, if I may say, is our Admiral sir, who is present on screen. So I will take the liberty of diverting the question to the Admiral, sir. Sir, we are eager to listen to your comments.
Thank you. I mean, at the outset, let me put Bimal at rest to say that we are already a blue water navy. You see, I would say that if you consider go back, I would put that in the early 60s, by about 61, 62, we were already a blue water navy. Remember, our first aircraft carrier came in 1961, the old Vikrant. And with that, we had an integral strike aircraft, we had an integral reconnaissance aircraft, and we had helicopters. And with support of frigates and cruisers, we had now, when you go back 61, it is the kind of vintage of the ships that is available at that time. We were already capable of deploying our forces or anywhere, virtually anywhere in the world. If you had a tanker support or a yawling facility, your ships can go anywhere. Since then, our number of units have gone up, the capabilities of the ships have gone up with the times. Of course, we want to be a bigger navy, but the fact is that, see, what we traditionally call, brown water or whatever is more of a, if you're restricted to the coastline or coastal, just protecting a coast. But we are already in a, like our ships are being deployed deep into the, Pacific, Atlantic, deeper into Indian Ocean. The southern tips is required. We have mission-based deployment, what the Navy is following now. You can show your presence anywhere in the world. So you are already a blue water Navy to meet that. Yes, whether you have more, how much for your groups you will be able to deploy, how many forces will be, because we are still in the process of growing. And because the fund constraint, Navy has not been able to attain the kind of force level that it needs to. And every time we are changing our, looking at bigger options. In fact, I would say apart from the Navy, our own Coast Guard, which is fully capable of today looking after your exclusive economic zone, is also going as far as Japan, etc., and exercising with the Japanese Coast Guard and the others. So they also got long arms, long reach with the kind of patrol vessels that we have. So we are already a blue water force. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
If I may answer also, I can also try and do an
Yeah,
answer.
Girish Shankar, yes, you are welcome.
Sir, the expressions like blue water navy or green water and brown water operations are mentioned and written without clear-cut demarcations. And according to this Indian Maritime Doctrine 2015, it is the ability to undertake distant operations and that distinguish between a blue water from a brown water. And in this sense, on December 4, 2019, during Navy Day, the Office of Defense Minister Rajnath Singh posted on Twitter that Indian Navy is now a blue water force. And if you can also I think actually debate, I think on its definition, at least it says that at least one aircraft carrier should be there. India has one, we had two, but INS Vikrant was decommissioned on 6 March 2017, and the other one, INS Vikrant, is coming on 2018, and a super carrier named INS Vishal will come in 2025. And nuclear submarines, yes, we have them. Warship, obviously, every strong navy has them. Ships, yes, we have them. To overseas bases, yes, we have them in Madagascar, Seychelles, and a few other countries. And as the Indian Navy has the capacity to carry distant operations over from the sea up to a considerable distance from national shore bases, it surely qualifies as a blue water force. Thanks.
Yeah, well put across, Girish Shankar, good show. And if there are any other questions, I will allow them. Otherwise, I have a temptation to request the Admiral to share at least few points from his side, because three youngsters have spoken, and I'm sure your comments will be very valuable to them in furthering their own research interests. If there are questions, you can go ahead. Otherwise, I'll request the Admiral, sir, to please speak. All right. I think the Admiral, sir, can share his views.
No, I think all three of them, while I have not made specific notes on individual, listening to all three of them, I think their respective chosen field where they talk of, they have done extensive research and carried out points very well. And I think two things that we got to, go in for is when you talk of blue economy and this eco-friendliness, ecology, the marine tourism, etc. These are aspects of the future. So I think all the three scholars have covered their particular aspects very well. And I think now on the theoretical study they have done, I'm sure they'll be able to recommend solutions or proposals in the years ahead, what we need to do. So I think I want to compliment all three of them. And I was quite impressed by the kind of detail that they have gone into, in-depth analysis to bring out suggestions and various points that has been raised. And I think that's, I would leave it at that because I don't want to go into, because Srinivasan has summed up each of their things at the end of the talk, but I think they have covered all of it very well. I'm very glad that you have gone into, because, because a country like Australia makes a lot of, tourism and money potential with the Great Barrier Reef, etc. But they also had their own problems, issues. So possibly one of the reasons is we had such abundance of, wealth and maritime thing, we tended to ignore it. So now that we are coming back to look at it and there's a thrust being given to it, these are aspects that we need to look at it. And only one, I think one of the speakers suggested underwater pipelines. So I don't know which of them suggested that, but I would say here that, even the underwater cables, which we have had for more than a century, for the communication lines, are susceptible. Today's technology, it is not only interrupting this because you have the pipeline going anywhere, with submersibles and underwater detection systems, you could even attack those, though it will be a little more difficult to attack. You need more specialist equipment rather than even a pirate boat attacking a, oil tanker. But this is also possible. And we need to look at, if that aspect of it. So that is just what is to be borne in mind. Because even across the land and this thing we had, now they're thinking of across the Arctic side, having the shipping coming through that way. All these are, which could have impact on economy because they don't want to go around all that. So this underwater pipeline, it's okay for short distances, short spells, but you have a longer this thing, then you need that much of maintenance and care for it. Otherwise, they're also susceptible to damage and attack, especially when they come closer to your coastline. We have had cases of this is happening very close to coast. So this is what you could bear in mind. That's it.
Thank you very much, sir. In fact, I'm sure I can see already Chitali Kohli noting down. So she will dig into it further, how to protect our underwater coastlines.
Yes, sir,
pipelines.
definitely.
Yeah, okay. Bimal Mahapatra, I saw you raising a hand. Would you like to add something?
Yes, regarding that AUKUS signed on 15th September 2021 between USA, UK and Australia. See, from the outset it is seen that it is against or it is regarding the Indo-Pacific security and mostly against China. But I expect some kind of trouble from AUKUS in the against India in long run. Is there any possibility of that? Will it pose any problem for India in the long run? This is my questions.
May I try and answer this, sir?
Yeah.
We are all aware that in the international relations domain or in the interactions with countries, each country acts first to promote its own national interest. Second, to try and contribute to either the global order, I'm talking about good order, or its own grouping. They have their own grouping and for their common interest. So these are the only two areas in which countries act. Not to say that they don't act negatively, but I'm saying positively. So will there be a threat in future? Will there be an undermining of our interests or even our efforts in the maritime domain? The short answer is just 3 letters. Yes, there will be. Because at what point of time the efforts, the policy initiatives or otherwise physical efforts that we are taking will be seen as inimical to some other country's own interest, we don't know. But our ability lies, or rather should lie, in the factor that we are able to foresee, we are able to predict, because each nation has a certain pattern of behavior. Like you take China, you take USA, you take Russia, you take anyone, Japan, Australia, anyone, they have a pattern. And generally, we can estimate that their interest will lie in this particular direction. So if we are thinking of a policy initiative or a program or coordination with a country or a group of countries which is going in a particular direction, we can reasonably predict that at some point there will be a clash. Therefore, what needs to be done is diplomacy and our ability to withstand negative shocks. Take, for example, this Ukraine-Russia issue. Okay, what happened? Everybody knows. But that we continue to get our oil and necessary resources from Russia indicates the ability of the Indian establishment to use diplomacy to protect its own interests. So that is the key. There will be clashes in future that nobody can prevent. When it will happen, nobody knows. We don't read horoscopes, national horoscopes, to find that, somebody will get married at 32 years of age or somebody will get divorced at 50 years of age. There are no horoscopes in international relations. So it's our ability to predict, it's our ability to prepare, and it's our ability to build that resilience, which will protect us whenever that contingency happens. That's my opinion. I hope it addresses your query.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think, Srini, I think he was asking, you were talking about the submarine deal. AUKUS, you talked about that, yeah.
Sir, including the submarine deal, my personal opinion,
Yeah. No, I want to ask our 3 young scholars whether they have any views before I put in my 2-bit worth of comment.
Right.
Yeah, anyone of you? Anyone in the audience?
Sir, it completely depends on national interest. Like you cannot predict the situations. So I cannot answer this question.
No,
so I think you
on the submarine per se, as Dr. Srinivasan brought out, there's an old British Prime Minister of the 19th century who actually said, in politics, there are no permanent enemies, there are no permanent friends, only common interests. So when your interests join, you go ahead. So as a nation, and especially a nation like India of our size, population, our this thing, we should always we should have sufficient power. When I say power, it's not purely military, economic power and everything else. Then only your opinions will be heard and valid. Now, as far as the submarine deal, which happened between this, there are a lot of commerciality in this, because armament industry and the armaments, whether especially submarines, etc., are very expensive platforms. So it suited the Americans and the British to try and join together and convince the Australians, because they have the old historical linkages between these 3, to try and get let us get a deal, and saying that we are offering you a better deal, we are offering you better equipment than this, we'll allow you to do that. So which the French felt bad, and the French, they made their own comments, and subsequently, it's gone missing. So as far as they're dealing with it, it has not got any will not have a direct impact. But yes, that means the 3 are close. But UK is really not, when you not part of the Quad or whatever it is. But all these countries, now we are the only resident fellow in this area, apart from Australia and Japan. We are the 3 ends. US is a little further away. So till the time we have the ability, and they know that we have the capability to look after their interests, they will all come close. Tomorrow, they feel that India is not of any use to them, they will slowly detach and walk away. So for us, you cannot blindly depend on anyone. Now just take up the Ukraine case. When all this happened, did NATO or any other power other than background, we'll give you this, did it actually come anyway to this thing? So it's for you to think whether Ukraine made a diplomatic error by, not announcing earlier that I'm not joining NATO, or did he think that he will not attack? I mean, these are questions that are still left unanswered. That's not the topic here. But the fact is, we have to keep our interest in mind, and whoever is with you at that particular time will be with you. So you cannot really have permanent friends or permanent distance. The submarine deal has got a lot of economic implications, which is what they went in for, which is what France is feeling bad because they seem to have been undercut at some stage. So it's like you're buying equipment from Russia or Russia. It's the same thing. Some other countries will want to buy it, but ultimately you buy it because it suits you. You are the buyer. If I want to tie up and buy a French aircraft or a German submarine or a American system, it's up to me as a nation to find out, can I get it? Will it suit my purpose? Can I afford the kind of money? And will I have the kind of backup for it? Or will my R&D and my backup systems in the country will be able to maintain, say, even if I buy a simple mobile phone, can my systems in India support me for next 5 or 10 years that I'm going to use it? So that is what we got to bear in mind in all international politics, especially in defense politics, because there is no point in having a fancy system if you cannot be supported. Because Commander Dua is here, with me, he'll know that there are times when we have been squeezed of critical spares. So we had to then indigenously produce it or find some other ways of operating it. So that is where we are talking of indigenization, which is something that the Indian Navy took to in a long back, in a very, very, we have been at it. I'm not saying that we are 100%, but in a large number of ways, we have been able to get. I'll stop it here.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, now I think we can continue our discussions, but we are already slightly past the time. And I'll take the liberty of inviting Professor Raju to share his concluding remarks. Raju, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, good. Yes, thank you for the opportunity given to me. Though center is also part of this webinar. Look at this is very important when you look at the various issues related to maritime. It's a very, very difficult task. When the moment you talk about maritime, so many issues come. There is no left issue. You cannot leave any issue when you are talking about maritime. So here we are talking about from sea lanes of communication. We are talking about free, open access, whether it is a resident country, whether it is a foreign country, whether you are talking about what you talk about ocean health, or ocean wealth, or blue economy, or maritime threats either emanate from land or from water. So there are so many issues which are really discussed with the limited time. So I think within 3-4 hours we are able to bring so many issues, and particularly when we talk about the young minds. And this is one aspect is very, very important, because in maritime domain in India, we look at the research on maritime is very, very less. Even I cannot say that I'm still, even I cannot be able to say that I'm a student of maritime studies. I am the one as a faculty here only to encourage others. So even I cannot be qualified as a student of maritime studies. So that is what my education on maritime awareness. So I think this is one aspect where I must compliment and congratulate Dr. Srinivasan for encouraging 3 young minds who came here and to discuss about either on security challenges or tourism or economic challenges in Indian Ocean or Indo-Pacific. So this is something which is very important, and then we need to look at that how to encourage the young minds to bring them to the platform where they can discuss and do research on many issues related to maritime. And when you look at ocean is a part of the world economy, and ocean is considered as a sea, as a last frontier for development. And we look at, on one hand, wealth from sea, and on the other hand, we are looking for sustainability. I think both, whether how they can go together. That is the reason why we are now talking about blue economy. So sustainable development implies that economic development is inclusive and avoids the depletion of the natural resources, and optimal use of ocean resources with the maximum benefits to the environment. I think that is somewhere we need to look at, and benefits not only to the present generation, but also we look for the next generation. I think that is the responsibility of this present generation, not to utilize this maximum utilization of the resources available. So that is also another dimension where we are talking about. And we are talking about 85% of the states of the world have a coastline, and 75% of the world's population lives in the littoral areas, and and so many capital cities and trading centers are also now looking at around the shoreline. So I think this is a very important aspect, and 90% of trade is also traversing through waters. So all these, when you know, all these statistics are available to us, but oceans of the world today are endangered domains. I think that is something where we need to look at about. So I think, and our young people also have taken, I think this is somewhere we need to look at, apart from geopolitics and security politics around us. I think we need to also focus on these areas, which are also very important when we are talking about human development. Ultimately, any state or any world or any organization is talking about welfare of the people. So I think we need to look at, and we need to encourage young people to move not apart from geopolitics, doing research on geopolitics and other areas. We need to focus on environmental dimension. We need to look at about the other aspects which are equally important. So with these words, I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I suppose even good things come to an end. So, so the webinar also has to come to an end. But we are very happy that we had some very fruitful discussions. I now invite Ms. Anima Puri, who is an assistant professor of political science at Manav Rachna University, Faridabad. She is also a senior research associate with Pragna, to give the vote of thanks. Anima, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It has been such an honor to be part of this wonderful event. On behalf of Pragna Center of Research, Electronic Journal of Social and Strategic Studies, and UGC Center for Maritime Studies of Pondicherry University, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers, Professor Gurmeet Singh, Ambassador Anil Sir, Admiral MP Muralidharan Sir, and Professor A. Subramaniam Raju Sir, for their invaluable insights on the theme of this webinar. We are confident that scholars, practitioners, and students who have attended will carry important thoughts to understand and analyze the concerns and prospects for India to grow into a preeminent maritime power in Indo-Pacific. We are thankful to Professor Gurmeet Singh, Vice Chancellor, for granting his approval to host the webinar on behalf of UGC Center. We deeply appreciate and remain grateful to Professor Raju for his encouragement. To the young speakers, we thank you for bringing our important thoughts through your research. We are confident that your further research journey will be more informed through insights gained today. Finally, I would like to thank the audience for taking the time to be with us today and helping us make this event a grand success. We'll be hosting the webinar recording on our YouTube channel soon. Thank you, one and all. Have a pleasant day. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anima. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Srini. Thank you.
It was such a pleasure meeting you again, sir, Admiral sir, and I hope the UGC Center for Maritime Studies will now avail additional opportunities to have you in person in the university, and that will be hugely beneficial. I'll request all young scholars who are present and who are not present also to join, so that we learn from the wisdom of your experience. And to Dr. Dua sir, of course, you are my source of inspiration. Okay, thank you so much for being here. To Vimal Mahapatra, we are all on the same group. Okay, so it's nice to keep seeing your postings there, but an opportunity to interact in person. Okay, to Girishankar, to Vrinda and Chitali, compliments to you on behalf of all of us. I'll put it that way. Keep
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
work on. Okay, keep it focused. Okay, and come out with more productive ideas which can be debated, which will benefit the entire community. You have such senior eminences who can give you direction. Okay, all that you need to do is push. Okay, that is my only word of advice to you. Admiral sir, I am aware that you are due for another.
Yeah. So with your permission, I'll leave. I got another session in the afternoon. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye, Ashok. See you later. Yeah.
I'm especially grateful to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Raju sir, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Then, sir. Girishankar, you take care. And Chitali, good show. And Vrinda, good show. Okay. Let's meet again on a different theme, sir. We'll organize something else so that we have more youngsters to come and discuss.
Yeah. Bye then, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.